It's the After Show with TelecomTV's Guy Daniels and Ray Maistre.
Yes, welcome to the After Show. It's day 2 of the Telcos and Public Cloud Summit, and we are live on TelecomTV. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content, and this is the second of 2 live Q&A shows. Indeed, it's the final programme of this year's summit. Today's panel discussion looked at whether or not hybrid cloud is still the optimum strategy for telcos. Plus, we also looked at how to secure telco applications in the public cloud. And we've already received questions from you on these topics, and our guests are back with us now to help answer them. But there is still time for you to send additional questions. Act fast. Please use the Q&A form on the website below the video player. And there's also a poll question. It's nice and simple, so go ahead and cast your vote now. And we'll be looking at the results later in the show. And as always, your co-host for the After Show is Ray Maistre, Editorial Director at TelecomTV. Ray, this is a new summit for TelecomTV, but already it's proved very popular.
Absolutely, and that shouldn't come as a surprise, Guy. I mean, just look at how many engagements there are between telcos and hyperscalers these days, and how many different types of telco cloud initiatives there are. And this is only the beginning. Distributed cloud platforms are going to change the way this industry operates, and there's a very real land grab going on right now to be the enabling platform of choice. It's fascinating to watch, isn't it?
It certainly is, but I'd rather be sitting here watching it than having to make those decisions as a CSP. Right, on with the show. So let's now meet our guests, who are, as always, eager to help with all your questions. And joining us live on the programme today are Fatih, who is Chief Architect, Telco Partner Solutions at Red Hat, Amy Zwaiko, Director of Cybersecurity at AT&T, Danielle Royston, Founder and CEO of Telco DR, and Ahmed Zadi, Telco Cloud NFV 5G Core Architect at Orange. Hello everyone, very good to see you all again. Lots of questions to get through, obviously, so let's get going. And Ray, do you have our first question?
Yes, I do, Guy. Thanks very much. And this first question, well, we're going to put it to Danielle, because I think this is a question in direct response to the top 5 that Danielle presented early in this week as part of the summit. And the question is, cloud ported versus cloud native. Where is the problem with cloud ported solutions if they work and contribute value as expected? So I guess this question is really about, if something works, does it really need to be cloud native? Danielle, I'm sure you've got a response to that.
Yeah, I do. So I think the big difference here is the way that application was built from the beginning. And a lot of times cloud ported, and what I mean here is, doing what you can to get it into the public cloud as quickly as possible. And so it's really easy to put it into a Kubernetes container, port it over. Code hasn't really changed. But I think the downside here is you're not taking advantage of what the public cloud really has to offer. You're really just taking advantage of the infrastructure. And so there's a wide variety of tools in the public cloud built for the public cloud that you want to sort of decompose that application so you can get the cost benefits, the security benefits, the scaling benefits, the resiliency benefits. And if you just port it from, say running on premise to now it's just running over at that cloud, I really think you're missing all the advantages that you can get if you instead refactor. And so that might be switching out a third-party database and starting to use a cloud database. But I think there's also tons of software the public cloud providers offer in their clouds that you should start to take advantage of, and they can really start to speed up your ability to get new features and new ideas to market and really increase your speed of innovation. So I'm a big advocate of don't just port it to the cloud, really change that application and make it native. And that does mean integrating very deeply and starting to be, I'm going to say it, maybe even locked into that cloud. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing. So don't just port, make it native.
Okay, so I guess the message there is it might be contributing value as a ported application, but nowhere near the value it could be if it was truly cloud native. Fatih, I see you want to come in on this one as well.
Yeah, so I want to highlight one thing is applications or services that we are referring are not 100% written by one team. So one of the best practices, if you remember early ages of software engineering, is write a modular software. Some of that modules can be reused later by other application developers, say networking stacks, say protocols, and so on and so forth. So whenever an app developer writing an application, say in telco domain with the telecom products or media or entertainment, they are leveraging those modules written way, way earlier. And much of them may not necessarily can go as is onto cloud. And that's the dilemma right now we are living with the 5G, especially because we are seeing, okay, cloud native 5G, fine. Everybody said the 3GPP standards are brand new and everything is all architecture designed around the service-based architecture, but yet those microservices or applications, say AMF, SPF, and all that, is mainly leveraging some of the modules or libraries or frameworks written ages ago. And those libraries, guess what? Not likely flying well with the cloud. So that's a big, I would say, dependency model we need to address rather than, layer 7 application has to be rewritten based on cloud native APIs and all that. Yeah, but there are other dependencies we have to be aware and be cautious of.
Okay, great points. And I think a very clear message then from our panel today about cloud ported versus cloud native. Okay, I think at this point, Guy, I'll hand over to you for the next audience question.
Yep, thank you very much, Ray. Hamed, let's put this one to you first, to start with first. And the question is, what has been the panelists' experience with migrating from one cloud provider to another to avoid cloud lock-in? How easy has it been to get your data out of the cloud for forensics?
Yes, so at least it depends on what kind of application we're talking about, example, if IT application or let's say telco application. But the thing what can I say is regarding to migrate to one cloud provider to another one, what we saw is due to also to Kubernetes and so on, it's to avoid any, let's say, cloud provider locking. It's something easier to do. So if the question, let's say, is what kind of application, so regarding all telco application is something, so we are trying, we didn't do it yet, but for obviously from some IT application, there's some work that is ongoing, let's say.
Thanks, Ahmed. So it's very, very much dependent there on what exactly we're looking at and considering. Fatih, let's come across to you for some additional comments.
So what I will say in here, short and quick, do not migrate. Stay where you are. And however, grow in other places, in other clouds. And by means of, if you want to enlarge your footprint, your coverage, your traffic capacity, and reliability, redundancy, just grow in the cloud. But if you try, okay, I'm going to migrate from on-premise or one cloud to another cloud, you're taking a lot of bullets into your chest by means of service degradation, auto service, and all that pain. Instead, you can stay where you are, still do the best operations you can, but grow in the cloud for the additional traffic. And over time, gradually, if your on-premise or the cloud traffic that you want to migrate from will, I'll say, decrease, and you can eventually end up where you want to be.
Okay, thanks, Fatih. That's an interesting perspective there. And Amy, let's come across to you for some comments from you.
Yeah, I wanted to focus on that last thing about pulling your data out and being able to do forensics. I think that especially in a telco space, the amount of data that we're talking about on doing forensics is enormous. I think what you really have to do, and kind of to build on what Fatih said, is work where you keep your data. If it's in the cloud, keep it there. Do your analytics there. Leverage some of the cloud analytics tools or port your own tools over to that cloud. I think that you really need to focus on that and really think about where you're doing your processing, and do I really need to pull all my data back into, say, my own private data centers? Is that really necessary anymore?
Great, thanks for those insights, Amy. So don't keep pulling your data out. Keep it where it is, and use the tools there. Well, look, this whole question about cloud lock-in is part of our poll, so we'll have a look later in the program to see what response from our audience that issue has. But for now, we've got a lot of questions to get through, so let me hand back across to Ray for our next viewer question.
Okay, thanks, Guy. And Amy, we're going to come to you with this question first. And the question is, what role will quantum security play in our networks? And when and where will we see it used by telcos and public cloud providers? So quantum security, it's very early doors for this, isn't it, Amy?
Well, it is, but people are already working on the quantum security. One of the biggest issues with it is that what's going to happen to key lengths and encryption and cracking encryption keys. There are a lot of people working on this post-quantum security in terms of encryption. I think that's one of the first places. I expect that we're going to see a difference in the way telcos adopt quantum security. I think it will be much more rapid than we've adopted other security technologies, and it's going to be because we have to. If you look at any telco, there are groups working on this post-quantum security. So I think we're getting into a position where we will adopt rapidly once the technologies are available, once it becomes really important. Once the technologies are available and once those technologies will affect our security, we will adopt rapidly.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amy. And in fact, today, I think BT here in the UK announced a development in terms of quantum network security and a live deployment with a customer. So things are definitely moving ahead there.
Well, I wanted to say one other thing that I forgot. I think that one of the things that's really exciting about it is our ability is telcos are going to have the ability to actually do forensics, to be able to do threat detection, threat analytics much more rapidly than we can do today. So I think that's one of the things that's a really positive part about quantum computing and quantum security in general.
Okay, all right. So lots of advantages to have there. So thanks very much, Amy, and thanks to the audience for sending that question in. So Guy, I think I'll hand back to you for the next question.
Yep, thank you, Ray. Well, just before we get on to our next question, we ought to have a look at the audience poll for the Telcos and Public Cloud Summit. One question, 5 multiple choice answers, but you can only pick one, as always. And the question we are asking this week is, what is the main barrier to successful telco and hyperscaler partnerships? And you can see the current real-time votes right here. And I can tell you that we've almost doubled the number of votes received since yesterday. But looking at this, I think the relative rankings look to be the same, with the number one barrier being identified so far as telcos' fear of losing control, closely followed by hidden costs, and there you go, vendor lock-in. It's the second place option. Now, if you have yet to vote, then please do so, because the more votes, obviously, the better. But don't delay, because we are closing the polls tomorrow morning. Okay, so back to our Q&A program, and we're about 15 minutes into the program, so we have plenty of time to answer more of your questions. So please do keep them coming in. Over to you, Ray, for our next one.
Okay, thanks, Guy. And Fatih, we'll come to you with this next question, and a timely one, given the poll responses there. The question is, given the hidden costs penalties and general obscurity of data fees in the public cloud, are there any tools or apps that telcos can use to mitigate against these challenges? And is this an area for what is known as FinOps? Any thoughts on that? How can telcos figure out exactly what their costs might be of using public cloud platforms?
That's a good question. So if we take a step on what the applications that will be running on cloud, it could be majorly two types of applications. The applications that you purchase from somebody else, like independent software houses or telecom NAPs, and applications you wrote in-house where you have access to the code, where you have all major control to make it cloud native and whatever changes you can make, right? There are two type applications that you're thinking to leverage cloud with. And what's pointed here as a FinOps is mainly leveraging the cloud in a financial effective manner with the cost mindset that you never ignore. And FinOps is actually a combination of systems, which is the technology stack, the application stack, best practices, which is actually going with the process of making and using cloud effectively, and the culture within your organization together with the cloud teams to drive your business towards the most effective goal with the best income, right? So it's the people, process, technology. As the poll pointing, as a friction point, the culture difference between telcos and the cloud. Okay, let me give you one example. So we started this journey with Kubernetes as being the de facto platform for microservices and applications, right? And at the time we were doing all the Kubernetes development, fast-paced delivery, we had 4 releases till recently. And we keep hearing the kind of complaints about it's too fast for telco, too fast for telco NAPs. And guess what happened? We lowered to 3 now, 3 releases a year. Even now, we are hearing a lot of requests from independent software houses saying, oh, Red Hat, please support longer term support for the releases. The one you're providing with LTS is not long enough for us. Okay, so now we are seeing, okay, the telco culture, which is mainly around obsessed about the maturity of the offerings and the services consumed by consumers, and cloud, where it represents the internet era, fast-paced delivery, fast time to market, right? And also, if you fail fast. That's the 2 different cultures. And this is right now the friction point. And we are sitting as Red Hat in the middle of it. And while doing so, we are trying to accommodate both sides, the telco side of the culture as well as cloud side of the culture. So we address the new era with the application modernization on cloud, as well as addressing our partners, software partners, delivering these, say, 5G core system runs in more mature way with the support models. While doing so, since we are guiding our customers as service providers or the consumers as well in financial effective way, we are trying to highlight, okay, the culture is important. Let's be aware. We structure our organizations in most effective way, as well as best practices. Do not ignore. Cloud could be a big mistake for you. Let's avoid that by means of financial burden. And the system and the technology, make sure whatever you have on premise today, as I was hinting before, stay where you are with the technology you had yesterday, but grow into cloud with the new technology that will complement your business, that will complement your strategy for business-wise, and grow in cloud. And over time, gradually, you will find yourself in more cloud-native way of doing things, rather than swallowing a blue pill, and you see, oh, I'm getting out of the matrix. Unfortunately, things are not like that.
All right. Okay, great. Well, it sounds like it's you're advocating take gradual steps and figure things out. And of course, it's different for each organization and different for the types of applications. But I think, as we've seen from the poll, the cost side of things is certainly something that's front of mind for quite a few people.
Well, remember, Rome is not built in one day. So you got to approach gradually. You build your cloud native infrastructure, services, and offering through phases. It's not a one-day effort. If you try to do that, it's such a big mistake.
Yeah. Okay, absolutely. Danielle, I think you wanted to come in on this one as well. And of course, this is a topic we have talked about on a number of occasions as well before.
We have. With the public cloud, it's just a completely different way of deploying workloads. Previously on premise, you would sit with your vendor or your IT team and provision the workload and understand sort of the dynamics of that application, pre-purchase capacity, failover, set it up. And it would kind of run like that for 5 years. You have the occasional outage with a hardware failure or whatever, or deploy and upgrade. But it was a very controlled, non-changing environment. And maybe new technology, new hardware would come around and you go do a CapEx evaluation, decide to upgrade. The public cloud, for example, AWS made over 2,000 announcements last year of new releases, new upgrades, cost changes, price reductions. And so I'm going to disagree a little bit with Fatih and say, once you move to the public cloud, you're in it. Right? You got to start living in this new world. You got to rip off the Band-Aid and start dealing with the new reality, right? Once you make the decision to move over to the public cloud. And so, what's interesting about FinOps, what used to be, sort of like I ask for a budget from finance, I get it, I buy it, the IT team is on their own. With the public cloud, this is now a new partnership that's almost a daily, certainly monthly and quarterly interaction, right? You're going to see spikes in your usage and variable costs. It's very unsettling to a finance team that likes to budget and really understand the cost. The IT guys or women, not many in telco, but the few women out there, now need to understand the cost implications of deploying a particular workload. IT people tend to play it safe, and so they kind of over provision the compute capacity. And when finance starts to see these new bills coming in, they're like, whoa, what's going on? And so finance needs to understand sort of the technical implications of, sort of trying to save money. I think the IT people need to design and be aware of the changes that are going on from a financial perspective. And my most recent podcast that I did with a vendor named Vertisant, my guest estimates that people are overspending in the public cloud by, get this number, 30 to 50%. And so that's a ton of savings out there today that if you are building a really strong FinOps group, and I think this is a new concept for telcos that's constantly looking at how we're using compute and storage, how are we optimizing our spend, how are we deploying workloads, how are we teaching our IT people to think in this very new cloud way. It's a whole new way of thinking, and again, the minute you move to the cloud, you're in it. You got to kind of rip off the Band-Aid and start to build up this muscle. And I think it's super exciting. It's such a great opportunity to save a ton of money and then redeploy those resources into focusing on, finding the killer 5G use case. So there's my answer on that.
Okay. All right. No, great insights. And what's clear here is that there's so many moving parts, so many things to consider, and it's not just a case of pressing a button and getting a cost analysis immediately. Amy, we'll come to you next, and then back to Fatih. So, Amy, let's come to you.
Sure. I wanted to comment both on what Danielle said and what Fatih said. I think that one of the things for a telco that you really have to focus on, that we have to focus on in terms of moving our core business to a cloud, which is, say, for our broadband, running our broadband and our 5G cores, for example. We actually have to rely on the vendors to be able to actually be looking at at asking the really hard question of how do I take the network function that, say, AT&T is buying from me and make that run efficiently in a public cloud. It's not just a question of, go buy your network function and then AT&T had to run it in a public cloud. That has to be designed from the ground up to be able for a telco to really be able to realize the savings with that. Danielle, you mentioned something about the 30 to 50% more expensive and, or more than it should have been. I would counter with sort of, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That if having been in IT for a long time, face it, that's how we architected systems. We architected them for worst case, which was what? 30 to 50% more the capacity than you really needed to run. So I'm not surprised to see this in public cloud. It's that same kind of, I need to make sure that it still works, and I'm just going to keep architecting it the way I did. I think that one of the things, if you go in and look at what you're doing, you're going to find that there's tons of stuff sitting there that you're not using, but you're kind of afraid to decommission it. So, it's going to be a long process of learning that, no, I can spin up a new one. I don't have to save the old ones. I can run that close to the bone because there's more compute available when I need it.
Yeah, great points, Amy, and all very relevant, I think, to our audience and to the person asking the question. So, Fatih, you wanted to come back in. I think Danielle wanted to add a quick comment after that as well.
So when I first got the question, I was like, okay. And then Danielle gave her speech. And then I realized, okay, this was a hidden advertorial for Danielle. Just joke aside, I want to give you one example, recent example. So we recommend telcos, TME companies, service providers be like internet-born companies, right? They have this ambition to follow them. And however, somehow we as us here and also telcos are not following the bad examples and taking lessons from it. Let me give you one example. A company that is born to deliver microtransactions in new era of payment system, fast. 8 months ago, it's valued over $1 billion, and they shut down their business almost 2 weeks now. And at the time they shut down their business, their cloud spending was 300% more than their income. Okay? So what I'm trying to tell you, while you're learning the best practices from internet-born companies for leveraging and the strength of cloud, but also learn from the mistakes those are doing, make sure you don't repeat those mistakes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's an awful lot of the learning curve is incredibly steep, and but I think all sorts of companies are learning a lot every week and every day. So Danielle, let's come back to you.
Yeah, I'm just going to respond to Fatih, it's not an advertisement. I didn't write the question, but something that Amy mentioned, I agree. I mean, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and they are used to over provisioning. And that figure wasn't necessarily a telco focused one. It was across all industries, right? If there's $100 billion of spend in public cloud, my expert said, my guest, Michael Kearns, is like 30 to 50%. That's everyone that's overspending. But I think something to really look at, and an easy way to get started is storage of data, right? Telcos need to keep data around regulated, usually for years. And what's so great about the public cloud is that there's different storage solutions at different price points. And if you don't need, quick and easy access, which a lot of times archival data, like how often do you need to access, data that's more than sometimes a couple of months or even a year old, you can start to put it in super cold storage that is running for like $1 a year. And you compare that to what people are doing on the ground today with private clouds and even on premise, where you're storing in a really expensive, let's say, Oracle database. You can now start to archive at different price points and start to bring down your cost point. And so again, it's something that came up in Amy's interview with you, Guy, sort of building that talent within the telco that understands these different price points, these different offerings, and starts to say, okay, this is super old data. It's not really running a workload. We have to keep it around. Let's put it in Glacier, right? Let's put it in super cold storage. And, it takes maybe 24 hours to access, but we don't need it that fast, so it's okay. You can start to adopt all these cool strategies with different databases and different storage elements and different sizes of compute, and really start to optimize your public cloud spend. So I'm really excited to get telcos to that point and start to help them really save money and profile their workloads. So yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I mean, there's nothing more important in this industry than the cost implications of everything that happens, because after all, these are all businesses that are being run here. So this is a massive consideration. And I know that we're going to be having this conversation again soon and likely in summits to come. So thanks for the great input from our panelists there. And Guy, I think we can move on to the next audience question now.
Yep, thank you, Ray. And looks like this question takes us in a slightly different direction. And I'll put this out to all of you, or any of you want to address this one, by all means do so. The question is, if big operators like Vodafone and AT&T, etc., are going to develop their own software or hand over R&D to the big cloud companies, then why do we need so many open source communities and industry standards groups? Isn't that work then going away? So distilling that down, Amy, thanks for volunteering. Distilling that down, because of the move and the shift we're seeing to public cloud, do we still need these industry groups?
Absolutely. And I think that, so I've worked in telco for nearly 30 years now. But really, I spent most of my career on the IT side of the house, so I'm more comfortable there. I've picked up lately more the 5G and even some of the broadband space. These industry groups, these open source communities, they've been what has truly driven the innovation in the IT space, especially the open source groups. If you think about it, think about the protocols we rely on, TLS. Think about all that really, it came out of open source. It came out of people working together to solve a common problem. The industry groups really help because what they do is they drive some standardization. They prevent you from, they help operators, they help all companies from getting locked into very, very proprietary software. I'm old enough here that I remember when most of the stacks were they were highly proprietary. It became very, very difficult it was almost impossible to switch off of things. When the internet popped up, and I'm talking about the more commercial aspect of it, that kind of mid-90s. All of a sudden, you could move more easily. Things were open. So I think that moving everything back into the cloud providers, a few high-tech companies, is actually going to take us a step backwards. So I advocate for the open source communities and the industry standards. I think it really helps keep things open and moving.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And as you say, they do perform separate roles, these two groups, the open source and the standards groups. Well, we've got some more comments coming up. So first of all, let's go across to Fatih for your comments.
Yeah, so I 100% agree with Amy. Open source enables the leveraging crowdsourcing, getting the best talent around the globe. Doesn't matter where they are, doesn't matter what time zone they are, doesn't matter who are paying for them. If their payers are aligned, their interests with this engagement driving, is perfect way of collaboration, as well as perfect way of making things are not locked into one person or one company. So it kind of opens your horizon by means of vision, as well as technology enabling your vision as well. That's where the open source shines. I don't think when you're moving with the cloud, say AT&T moved their network to the particular cloud vendor, not necessarily they are giving up on the open source part of it or standardization part of it. They're more embracing of it to make sure others come and use this platform as their grow area as well.
Yeah, thanks, Fatih, for that. Absolutely right. Danielle, let's get some thoughts from you.
Yeah, really quickly, I think industry standards are great, obviously, for the telco and their vendors, right? It makes, vendors will hate this, but it makes it easier to switch out vendors and choose different people. But let's just look at it from the customer's perspective. Let's look at it from, let's say, an enterprise customer that's trying to buy connectivity from several different telcos around the world, right? When you start to expose an interface to your network that make it very easy for enterprise customers to understand and integrate to, that just helps your own business. And so, kind of looking at it from a very very global organization that's trying to buy connectivity from several different MNOs around the world, right? When there's that standard defined, exposed at the edge, an API, if you will, that you can integrate to very easily. And even better when it's integrated to public cloud as well. We all know these enterprises have started. Telco is one of the last industries to adopt public cloud, but the other industries have gone for it. These IT groups are already very familiar with programming with APIs and standards from the public cloud vendors, and they want to bring their public cloud and use your connectivity. And so I think standards are a wonderful way to make sure everyone's speaking the same language.
Great. Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure we could ask a follow-up question. We won't today, but a follow-up question about whether the groups are covering the right areas in the right timeframes and at the right speeds. But we'll park that one for now, because that's a whole can of worms, and move across to our next viewer question, which, Ray, I think you have.
Yes, I do. And this is one that's just come in while the program's been running. And so again, this is a question for the whole panel. And the question is, let me just read it here as it's come in. Is the decision-making process for telcos considering using the public cloud more complex than for any enterprise because of the legacy systems and customer bases involved? Even some of the greenfield operators like Rakuten Mobile are not using the public cloud. What does the panel think? So essentially, I think the question is, is it more complicated for telcos to be using the public cloud? And is it easier for enterprises? Okay, Danielle, I saw you wanted to come in there on that one.
I'll start first on this one. I'm sure everyone will jump in. I think telco likes to think we're special and things are unusually difficult in our own industry. But I'll just point you over to banking because banking thinks the same thing. Or I'll point you over to actually F1 teams. They think the same thing. Everyone thinks they're a special situation that no one understands our world. And so it's difficult for everyone. But you should still go do it. And I think it's a 5-year plus journey to analyze the workloads that you're moving and how to move them and the best way to do that, right? I think Verizon started in 2016. I interviewed someone on the podcast. They took, I think, about 4 years to do it. M1 in Singapore, Nathan Bell's done a really great job of moving a lot of their workloads over to the public cloud. And then Dish is making probably the biggest bet of all and moving their, everything, partnering very closely with AWS to deploy their network using as much public cloud as possible. So I think, I don't think we're special. I think it's hard everywhere. Get going. It's going to take you years to do it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Danielle. And Ahmed, did you want to come in on this one?
Yeah. So what I can say regarding the cloud, let's say, not cloud, but the telco world, let's say, if you can focus only on the legacy one. The telco application, we have several telco application, not only one. So we still have more than 10 application, and the goal is at least to try to build and to communicate each application with the others. And this is what telco is very, very complicated use case. What I can say is if you succeed to run, let's say, telco application and the public cloud, you are able to do everything. So this is why we have several challenges at least to solve. We have several interface that they are talk with the other interfaces and the other application. So for me, let's say, as also during my experience, as I can say, is telco, of course, it's something that is very complicated application. It's not only application, but system. So if you succeed to run telco application or all of the application that are making the telco mobile, let's say, working, you will succeed at least to do everything after.
Okay, great. Yes, and as Danielle mentioned, this isn't, and I think this has been mentioned a couple of times, this isn't something that might happen overnight. It'll be a gradual process. Amy, let's come to you next.
Sure. I think that I agree with Danielle and Ahmed. If you are building a large application that is highly distributed, that is got to run all the time. It has real-time implications, basic mobility. It's a real-time application. That is difficult whether you're in the private cloud, whether you're in a public cloud. It doesn't matter. So I don't think it's any more difficult to move it into a public cloud than it is to deploy it privately. It's just it's a different problem. You have to look at the problem differently, but you're still going to have to solve for it. From telco, people we use the old thing of when people pick up the phone, they expect dial tone. Well, when they go to send a text, when they go to connect a phone call, they expect it to work. And providing that level of service, it doesn't matter what the underlying compute is. It's a difficult problem. Doesn't mean you shouldn't embrace the public cloud, and it also doesn't mean that the public cloud cannot handle that type of workload.
Okay, yeah, great points there, thanks. And Fatih, let's come over to you.
Yeah, so not long ago, I was part of one of the cloud service providers, and in one of my project engagements. So we tackle all the technical problems. We know the solution blueprint by means of technicalities. Everything is ironed and well, I would say, designed and considered. And then we hand it over to, okay, we are at the stage of procurement. And guess what happened? So our side sent our legal terms and conditions to the service telco side. Telco sent their terms and conditions to us. So if there are two big boys in the room, they will never agree who's the bigger one. And then that was the longest period that took. We ironed the solution in 1 week, but the legal collaboration and terms and conditions took months. So it depends on what is the expectation from SLA point of view, SLO point of view, as well as legal point of view as well. So we will live and learn, and I guess each side will compromise their own legal terms in some way or form to make it work.
Okay, great. So the message here is it'll only be more complex if the legal people make it so. I think that's that appears to be the takeaway. Okay, goodness me, we've already run past 40 minutes. Guy, have we got time for one more question?
I think it's a quick one. So let's see if we can just slot this question in. Yeah, thanks, Ray. Danielle, this is a question that's been directly asked of you. It's a clarification for something you said earlier in your earlier video. The question is, why does Danielle Royston think that Kubernetes managed containers aren't cloud native? Why would a containerized application not work on a public cloud?
It's not that I don't think it'll work. It will work. I just think it's a little bit of a cheat. And I wrote a blog, if people want to, that explains all my top 5 and why I thought that just went out. It's available on my website, telcodr.com. That kind of explains all of the 5 things in my top 5 list in a little bit more detail. But, Kubernetes is being used as a little bit of a hack to get older legacy applications that were designed primarily targeted towards an on-premise deployment situation. And we're using the transitive property here, where if my application is in Kubernetes and Kubernetes is cloud native, therefore my application is a cloud native application. And while I think technically that's true, what you'll see when you start to look under the hood at these applications and how these vendors are doing it is they're dumping it into one large container. And when you start to ask them tough questions about how does this application scale and is it elastic, you start to hear things about having to manually fiddle with knobs and buttons to actually get the elasticity and the redundancy and the scaling that you need. I'm going to say that's not what we're talking about with cloud native. And so I think it's a little bit of a hack. It's useful. I've seen telcos throw a lot of their legacy applications into Kubernetes containers and throw that into the cloud. But then they're running actually more expensive than on premise. And they're like, DR, why is this happening? I'm like, well, because you kind of cheated. You got it over there, which is really great. It's a great first step. But then you got to start to break down that application into smaller pods and start to really use scaling benefits. And so Kubernetes sometimes is a really, depending on the application and depending on the situation, it's a really great, a great tool, and you should use it. But it's not the panacea. It's not the end all be all. You're not done. And I'll tell you just a really quick true story. With Totogi, my software business that has a charging system. We actually first started designing the charger to use Kubernetes, and charging is a very speed is really important. The database is super important, and putting Kubernetes layer in there was operationally just a little bit too expensive. And so when we took it out and made it serverless, it just sped it up. Now we can handle 1 million transactions per second, pay by the use, automatically scale, fail over to another availability zone or another region really easily. And so, and we got that by taking out Kubernetes. So here I just, sometimes it's the right thing. It's not always the right thing. And I think I hear a lot of people using it as the default answer. And I just, do your homework, do the math.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. Yeah, do the math. But before we go, let's go across to Fatih for some final thoughts on this. What will be our final question?
So I think I agree with Danielle about people and the software houses coming saying that their applications are cloud native. Actually, they are trying to fake it till they make it. They're faking it. They're dumping their model into one gigantic container, and they say, "Oh, let's run this on Kubernetes." Obviously, it's not well behaving by means of scalability, performance, and observability, and monitoring, so on and so forth. Remember what I had said earlier. There are two types of the software houses within Telco. One is NAP driven. One is in-house driven. The NAP side is where we are seeing this a lot. But within the NAP, remember what I also said. Even though we are designing from 5G from bottom up, from scratch, some of the applications are still leveraging old libraries and stacks to start with for, say, network communication, TCP, IP, and all that. And guess what? We also saw that some of the microservices coming and saying they cannot support more than 4 gig RAM. 4 gig RAM in this cloud era is nothing. And we realized the limitation is because the libraries they inherited over like 10 years ago. And they said, okay, we will fix this. It's, again, faking it till making it. But that's not the fault of Kubernetes. This is not an issue originated from Kubernetes. It's about how you're consuming it. And say, okay, I have a self-autonomous vehicle. Guess what? If you want to try that self-autonomous vehicle in India or China, it may not work for you because it has different dynamics for traffic up there.
Good points, actually. It's not the fault of the software or the application or the service. It's often how people are using it and implementing it. Right. Well, look, we are out of time. This has been fun. We're out of time though. So thank you so much to all of our guests who joined us for this live program, and to our audience for sending in questions. And I know we still have questions we didn't get to, but hopefully another time we will get there. That is a wrap for our very first Telcos and Public Cloud Summit, but Ray and I will return, plus we get to leave the studio.
Yeah, we get to prove that we're not just avatars, because the DSP Leaders World Forum is an in-person event being held at an incredible location near Windsor in the UK at the end of May. It's going to be a real melting pot of top-level industry decision makers from all sides of the industry, from Tier 1 telcos to hyperscalers to technology developers, with an emphasis on participation, home truths, and some pretty darn fine coffee and some wine. I can't wait. And here's what you can expect.
Put those PowerPoint slides down and actually talk about what we need to do to move ourselves into the DSP arena.
How exciting. So please join us in person at the DSP Leaders World Forum event in May. It would be great to see as many of you as possible there. And then, of course, we shall return online in June for our Open RAN Summit. Don't miss that. For now, though, thank you for watching and goodbye.
The after show was recorded in front of a live online audience.